Hello everyone. Welcome to Postcard Buddhism, the best channel for sharing knowledge about Buddhism. Today we will talk about the topic, right action. Right action is a fundamental aspect of Buddhist practice, emphasizing the importance of ethical conduct and moral behavior. By understanding and following the 5 precepts, not killing, not stealing, not lying, not engaging in sexual misconduct, and not using intoxicants, we can cultivate compassion, respect, and mindfulness in our daily lives. Through this practice, we develop a deeper connection to our spiritual path and foster a harmonious relationship with the world around us. The precepts taught by the Buddha for a peaceful life. Some people need a list of precepts to ensure they act ethically and truthfully. Others require precepts to feel confident that they have achieved their spiritual goals, either in heaven or enlightenment. The Buddha also pointed out ways of behavior to avoid suffering, but genuine ethical action is not confined to any set of rules. Instead, these are guidelines related to our actions, showing us how they cause suffering to ourselves and others, how each person's choice of ethical actions impacts everyone. The 5 precepts. Buddhist precepts begin with 5 rules that need to be carefully observed for spiritual progress. 1. Do not kill. 2. Do not steal. 3. Do not lie. 4. Do not commit sexual misconduct. 5. Do not use intoxicants. Followers of the Buddha take a vow to observe these precepts, known as the 5 precepts. However, these moral principles were not invented by the Buddha. They are fundamental ethics present everywhere and timeless. 4 of the 5 precepts are mentioned in the Noble Eightfold Path. Right speech includes not lying. Right action is seen as refraining from killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct. The last precept, not using intoxicants, is also part of right action because an intoxicated person cannot avoid wrongful speech or actions. In the early stages of moral development, we need these precepts just as a child needs parental reminders like, don't touch the hot stove. As the child grows and understands the reasons behind the warnings, they recognize that the advice is to keep them safe. Similarly, when we have a complete understanding of ethical actions, right conduct becomes automatic. We no longer have the desire to break the precepts and do not need to rely on them to stay on the right path. Ethics in action. Traditionally, right action includes refraining from killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct. Although the terms are similar in the 5 precepts and in defining right action in the Noble Eightfold Path, their meanings slightly differ. In the 5 precepts, the meanings are simple and clear. Just do not do these 3 things. Killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct are the worst actions one can commit, and if one breaks these precepts, peace cannot be attained. Thus, we make a strong, firm vow to observe them strictly. However, when the Buddha spoke of right action in the Noble Eightfold Path, in the sense of avoiding killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct, he gave the simplest examples of how one could violate these precepts. Therefore, this restraint must be understood not just narrowly as keeping precepts, but also as broader guidelines for higher ethical actions. For example, in one sermon, the Buddha encouraged everyone to act with compassion towards all beings with the following teaching: all fear violence. Life is dear to all. Putting oneself in the place of another, one should not kill nor cause another to kill. Daiksa 129. The Buddha explained that any action that causes harm to others, such as vandalizing houses, starting fires, or threatening with weapons, is wrong, even if no one is killed. I once heard about a young man who disliked his roommates and retaliated by secretly destroying their personal belongings, such as throwing their clothes in the toilet or damaging their computers. Such petty vindictiveness and pranks that harm others are also unethical actions. There are also more subtle ethical actions. For instance, the precept of not killing reaches its highest meaning when we develop an attitude of complete harmlessness and always wish well for all living beings. We practice right action not just to avoid breaking the precepts or out of fear of punishment. We avoid cruel, malicious actions because we see the consequences of such actions. They bring unimaginable suffering to ourselves and those around us, in the present and future. We practice right action to make our lives useful and harmonious, not destructive or opposing, and to keep our minds pure, peaceful, and free from the distress of remorse and guilt. When discussing the observance of precepts, the mind plays many tricks. Some people tell themselves that precepts are not for the young. They say, right now, I have the right to enjoy myself and do whatever I want. When I get older, I will reform. Unfortunately, keeping precepts only at the end of life is like winning the lottery just before you die. If you wait too long, you will not benefit from the peace that a moral life can bring. Free from addiction, healthy relationships, a clear conscience, and a tranquil mind. It is best to enjoy the good results of a moral life while you are young, healthy, and strong. In old age, you do not need moral precepts to prevent you from wrongdoing. Another excuse we often use is to tell ourselves, what good are these moral rules to me? My life is good as it is. If that is your attitude, it is best to re-examine your thinking carefully. If your life is good, why do you need to lie, steal, drink, or kill? Breaking precepts quickly becomes a hard-to-break habit. Moreover, these actions inevitably lead to negative consequences. There is no escaping the law of cause and effect. Breaking moral principles can result in the loss of wealth, health, and the love of those close to you. You will also face anxiety, guilt, and even greater suffering. Remember, we keep moral principles to be happy, not to suffer. Even seemingly small, insignificant, unethical actions can have harmful effects. I once heard of a man who lost the chance to win a multi-million-dollar contract simply because he killed a bug. He was a very skilled and knowledgeable businessman. He had an appointment to meet a potential partner to discuss the deal. While they were talking, a bug landed on the rim of the businessman's glass. He used his spoon to push the bug to the bottom of the glass. When the bug crawled back up, he pushed it down again. Throughout the million-dollar conversation, he continued playing with the bug, pushing it down until it drowned at the bottom of the glass. His potential partner later told me that when he saw this behavior, he thought, this man is too cruel. He might do anything wicked to get money. I don't want to do business with such a person. So, he withdrew from the partnership. You might wonder why the rules in right action are phrased negatively. Do not kill, do not steal, and so on. The reason is simple. We cannot find joy in positive actions until we give up the wrong ones. We tend to act with a mind full of desire, leading to various types of suffering. First, we must resist this natural tendency. Then we can see how pleasant, calm, peaceful, and happy it feels to act ethically. You cannot cook a delicious meal in a dirty pot, or create a beautiful garden on a plot full of weeds. Refraining from unwholesome actions creates the right environment for wholesome actions to flourish. For example, avoiding killing or harboring anger creates the right conditions for love and compassion to develop in our interactions with others. Similarly, avoiding stealing, taking anything not given, whether material goods, labor, thoughts, or innovations of others, leads to the growth of generosity. Ethical actions shift our attention from self-centered, selfish interests to benefits for others and ourselves. When immersed in our desires, we are dominated by greed, hatred, delusion, and other selfish mental states. Thus, we cannot restrain ourselves or have the wisdom to act rightly. But when we refrain from unwholesome actions, the mental fog lifts a little, and we start to see that love, compassion, and generosity truly bring us happiness. This clear-mindedness helps us act ethically and progress on the path following the Buddha's footsteps. Not killing, the tendency to harm or cause pain to other beings often stems from anger or fear. When we intentionally kill a living being, even something as small as an insect, we diminish our respect for all life, including ourselves. Mindfulness helps us recognize our wrongful actions and take responsibility for them. Observing our mental states, we see that anger and fear keep us in a cycle of violence and callousness, leading us to harmful actions and destroying our inner peace. Refraining from killing brings peace to our minds and frees us from anger. This insight helps us to restrain ourselves from wrongful actions and embrace actions stemming from compassion and generosity. A student of mine mentioned feeling fearful and reactive towards certain small creatures like mice, lice, or leeches. Due to these feelings, she was willing to kill them. As mindfulness practice made her more gentle, she vowed not to kill these creatures anymore. As a result, her feelings of fear and aversion towards them also diminished. Recently, she even found the courage to catch a cockroach in her hand and release it outside instead of killing it. When we refrain from killing, respect for life grows, and we begin to act with compassion towards all beings. This same student once visited a friend living at a meditation center. Upon arrival, she noticed traps set to catch buds in front of the staff houses. Dozens of yellow jackets had fallen into the traps, lured by the sweet smell of apple juice. Once they entered through the small hole, they could not escape. Eventually, exhausted from trying to fly in the confined space, they fell into the juice and drowned. She asked her friend about the traps. He agreed that such devices should not be in a meditation center, but said that they had been there for a long time, and he could not do anything about it. Although she tried to ignore the sound of the buds buzzing in the traps, she could not get the image of their suffering out of her mind. She felt compelled to do something to give a few of them a chance to escape. She took a knife, made a small hole at the top of the trap, and stuck the knife in. A few yellow jackets crawled up the knife handle and flew out. Then she made the hole bigger, and more insects escaped. Finally, she realized she could not bear even one more insect dying in the traps. Despite her concerns about her actions, she eventually took all the traps to a nearby garden, opened them, and freed all the remaining insects. As she did so, she silently wished, "May I be freed from unwholesome minds and actions, just as these creatures are freed from these traps." Since then, she has no longer feared yellow jackets. Last spring, a yellow jacket nest appeared under the entrance to the Bhavana Society. Many people were stung and the area was fenced off. However, this student continued to use the entrance without harming any creatures. "I would be very surprised if another yellow jacket stung me," she said. "But if it does, I will still feel sorry for the insect, knowing it acted out of fear or injury." As you can see from this student's experience, refraining from killing creates a conducive environment for compassionate actions to grow in our lives. This is wonderful and an effective way to progress on the path of practice. However, we should not be too rigid in advocating non-killing. Mindfulness requires us to decide our ethical actions and not insist that everyone else follows our example. For example, consider the issue of eating meat. Although I do not eat meat, I do not impose this on everyone. From a broader perspective, even vegetarians indirectly contribute to killing. For example, in a village of about 1,000 vegetarians, the neighboring village has farmers growing vegetables, fruits, and grains to feed the 1,000 villagers. When they till the soil or protect crops from pests, they inevitably kill many small creatures. Then more insects and creatures are killed by the machinery during harvest. The vegetarians in the neighboring village feel comfortable. Although many creatures have been killed, they do not feel guilty because they did not intentionally want to kill. You can see from this example that eating vegetables and killing insects during vegetable cultivation are two separate issues. Similarly, the same reasoning applies to eating meat. Eating meat and killing animals for meat are two entirely different things. Even the Buddha sometimes ate meat when offered. Those who eat only meat do not necessarily wish to kill. Because of the purpose of observing the precept of not killing, the Buddha clearly defined killing as the deliberate act of taking a life. In the precepts for monks and nuns, the Buddha outlined the specific conditions that constitute an act of killing. There must be a living being. We must be aware that there is a living being. We must have the intention to kill. We must plan the method of killing. We must carry out the act of killing using the planned method. Meat eaters do not fall into any of these conditions. They know what they eat is meat and that it comes from animals. However, they do not have the intention to kill the animal, nor do they participate in the act of killing it. If meat is not available, we should not seek, hunt, or slaughter animals for food, but should eat something else. However, we should not overly stress avoiding everything that indirectly contributes to killing. In modern life, many things can indirectly contribute to killing. For example, when driving or walking through a grassy area, we may inadvertently kill insects. Some medications we use have been tested on animals, through killing them, harming them, or making them ill. Using these medications is not considered an act of killing. The Buddha clearly taught that it is the intention, the deliberate choice, that matters. Regarding spiritual development, there is no difference between a vegetarian and a meat eater. When a vegetarian harbors greed or suspicion, they act just like a meat eater. If you wish to become a vegetarian, by all means do so. Vegetarian meals are very beneficial for health. Personally, I am a vegetarian out of compassion for animals. However, do not feel obligated to avoid eating meat to attain the greatest happiness. Many lay practitioners ask me what to do about insects in their homes or gardens. They want to be good Buddhists and avoid killing, but their flowers will wither or their homes become dirty because they dare not touch the insects. I tell them that killing insects, even for a good purpose, is still killing. However, not all killing has the same karmic consequences. Typically, killing an insect does not hinder our spiritual progress as much as killing an animal, like a dog. Similarly, killing a dog will not disturb the mind as much as killing a human. No act of killing brings more calamity upon oneself than killing one's parents or an enlightened being. Such killing obstructs the murderer from attaining enlightenment in this life and leads to the worst possible rebirths. Compared to this, killing insects is not a significant issue. Understanding that there are many kinds of karma, we choose our actions and accept their consequences. Not stealing. Stealing is an expression of greed or envy. Taking what does not belong to us is a bad habit that is hard to break. Some people have so little restraint in this area that even when they attend a meditation retreat to find happiness and peace, they continue the habit of stealing. At Bhavana Society, we have encountered instances where people steal meditation cushions. I do not know of anyone who has attained enlightenment while meditating on a stolen cushion. Our library has faced similar problems. As Bhavana Society is in a forest and far from major bookstores, we maintain a collection of sacred texts. Over time, some books have disappeared. It is amusing that people come here to meditate and learn about the Buddha's teachings, but fail to realize that taking what is not theirs cannot bring peace of mind. Practicing right action and not stealing means striving to live honestly and respecting others' property. This means telling a cashier if they forgot to charge you for an item or gave you too much change. It means returning what is not yours without expecting any reward for your honesty. Of course, sometimes honesty leads to material rewards. I recall a news story about two children who found a bag of money in a Sears bathroom. They took the bag home and discovered it contained over $36,000. With their parents' support, the children decided to turn the money over to the police. It was discovered that the money belonged to a customer who had stopped by Sears on their way to the bank and left the bag in the bathroom. Imagine the customer's relief and joy at having their money returned. This incident surely sparked faith in human goodness and honesty in their heart. The grateful customer rewarded the children appropriately, and the community praised their integrity. Taking someone's property or money is obviously stealing. However, we often witness subtler forms of theft. For example, claiming someone else's ideas as our own is stealing. Taking small items from work like pens, paper, or discs for personal use is also stealing. We often justify such actions by thinking, I could have thought of that, or the company owes me these things because they pay me so little. Cheating on taxes, writing bad checks, bribery, or engaging in deceitful business practices are also forms of theft. Even eating food in a supermarket when you're hungry is considered stealing. Remember, never satisfy the body at the cost of the mind. Our purpose in observing ethical precepts and right action is to lead a happy life. If we break precepts, suffering will surely follow, in this life or the next. To be happy, the mind must be peaceful, and the conscience must be clear. Do not think that refraining from stealing is to please the world. You do it for your own serenity, now and in the future. Once we transcend the gross level of struggling against any form of theft, we can reconsider our concern for others' needs and become less attached to material possessions. Using the precept of not stealing as a guide, we become less envious of others' possessions or good fortune. Instead, we discover the joy of empathy and take delight in others' happiness. Abstaining from sexual misconduct. This precept of the Buddha is often interpreted as refraining from engaging in improper sexual conduct, but it actually applies to much more than just sexual activities. The Buddha really intended to advise us to refrain from indulging the senses indiscriminately. All the senses. Sexual misconduct is a particularly harmful form of such indulgence. Due to this precept, people often think that when the Buddha speaks of indulging the senses, he only refers to refraining from improper sexual acts. These acts include rape, forcing someone to engage in sexual activities without their consent. Additionally, this precept also refers to sexual abuse of children, animals, someone else's spouse or partner, or someone who cannot protect themselves. If a partner, even without marriage, lives together and one betrays the other, it is also considered sexual misconduct. Sexual relations with an adult partner, appropriate and consensual, are not considered misconduct. Beyond the mentioned issues, people often face many problems due to sexual desire. Ironically, sexual desire can never be completely satisfied. Even after enduring numerous trials, sufferings, and efforts to satisfy their desires, the longing for sexual pleasure never fades. Some people turn to meditation due to the torment brought by their sexual desires. Unfortunately, often while they strive to attain concentration and mental peace, sexual desire continues to trouble them. The only solution to this problem is to begin by controlling your sexual activities. If you cannot control them at all, the path to happiness will remain forever distant. Some diligent meditators have made significant progress in abandoning vices like drinking or lying, yet they do not realize why they need to control their sexual activities. They say, "I don't see anything wrong with just wanting to have a little fun." According to traditional classifications, it seems there is still a lack of understanding about what should be avoided in sexual activity. Many argue that the precept does not prohibit relations with multiple partners as long as they are single and suitable, nor does it oppose seeking trivial pleasures. But trivial pleasures degrade your dignity, diminish your humanity. Promiscuous sexual relations harm you and others. So what is the purpose of this kind of fun? To bring you pleasure? To satisfy your desires? However, we have previously stated that desire craving is the root of suffering. The Buddha's second noble truth teaches that all suffering arises from craving. Indulgence in sexual activity is one of the easiest ways for our minds to fall into the cycle of craving and aversion. Sexual pleasure is fleeting, but the price we pay, humiliation, anxiety, jealousy, regret, fear, loneliness, and the endless desire for more pleasure, is immeasurable, making us chase after it incessantly. The problem is that craving cannot be satisfied through material means. Doing so is like scratching an itch with fingers coated in itch-inducing ointment. Although scratching may provide temporary relief, it spreads the toxin further, making the itch worse. The cure for this ailment requires self-restraint, not doing things that only increase your future suffering. The Buddha used a powerful metaphor to describe the offenses people often commit regarding sexual matters. In the Buddha's time, lepers often sat around a fire, burning their wounds. Leprosy caused unbearable itching. Pressing the flame to the wound provided temporary relief. But the fire did not completely stop the itch or heal the disease. Instead, they burned themselves. Once the temporary relief was gone, the wounds would swell and fester from the burns. These miserable individuals eventually had to endure more suffering and itching than before. Thus, these lepers would return to the fire to burn themselves again. The Buddha said that we are like this when we seek to satisfy our desires. When we seek the fire of physical pleasure, we may find temporary relief from the suffering and frustration of craving. But indulging in it does not heal us. Instead, we only burn ourselves. So how much more intense does the craving, the itch, become? The Buddha continued, "If a physician comes with a remedy for the lepers, they apply the medicine and are completely cured. What do they think of the fire now? No power on earth could make them want to burn themselves again. Old friends might call them to the fire, but they remember what happened, the madness of craving and the temporary relief of the flame. Nothing could make them go back. They feel great compassion for their old friends and for their own previous suffering." The Buddha often spoke of himself as a physician and his teachings, the Dharma, as medicine. For all the medicines in the world, various and numerous, there is none like the medicine of Dharma. Therefore, O monks, drink this medicine. Having drunk the Dharma medicine, you will be ageless and deathless. Having practiced and seen the truth, you will be quenched, freed from craving. Milne 335. Hearing this, you might ask, so do I have to choose between a partner and the path? This misunderstanding has worried many people. Sexual activity between two responsible adults does not obstruct their spiritual practice. In fact, such a supportive relationship can be a valuable asset in progressing along the Buddha's Eightfold Path to happiness. The precept against sexual misconduct can be upheld in subtler ways, beyond merely mechanical adherence to the precept. At the highest level, we regard all women as our sisters, and all men as our brothers, the elderly as our parents, and the young as our children. When this happens, desire disappears. We simply no longer see the opposite sex as objects of sexual desire. All previous attitudes vanish, even subtle desires dissolve into vast compassion and concern for others' safety. Furthermore, to perfect right action in the Eightfold Path, the Buddha advised us not to misuse any of our senses. Besides violating the precept of sexual misconduct, what else does this mean? It means that when we satisfy our desires by overstimulating any of our senses to the point of exhaustion, we are misusing our senses. What areas have we neglected, overlooked in our actions, activities, through which we push our body and mind beyond reasonable limits for pleasure or escape, forgetting reality? Ask yourself, do I allow myself to watch television for hours on end? Spend time on unnecessary paperwork until late at night? Eat more than what is needed to sustain life? Attend places where the music is so loud that it feels like my ears will burst? Seek pleasure to the extent that my body is exhausted and unable to work the next day? Use the internet for life and community benefits or merely for entertainment until my eyes blur and my mind freezes? These activities are unsuitable for the body in the spiritual path. But how will you feel if you give them up? In their place, self-respect will grow. The ego that arises from these activities can be broken, making room for a generous, spiritually inclined heart, no longer enslaved by the call of desire. Abstaining from intoxicants. The final precept in the 5 precepts instructs us to avoid using alcohol, drugs, or other intoxicants. And this precept is also contained in right action. When introducing this precept, the Buddha used conditional terms. He did not advise lay people to avoid all intoxicating substances, but only those that can make us insane, mindless, and careless. In other words, using narcotic painkillers prescribed by a doctor does not violate this precept. Occasionally drinking a small amount of light alcohol is also not a problem. In short, we must use our intelligence. Although we are allowed to drink a little alcohol, we should not do it. One drink often leads to another. Some people get drunk after just one drink and cannot control themselves. Therefore, the best time to practice self-restraint is before the first drink, not afterward. Some people become addicted over time, increasing their consumption gradually, so they do not realize that regular drinking has become a serious issue. Furthermore, keeping alcohol at home makes it easy for people to use it to escape or reduce stress. We can live completely healthy lives without alcohol, so it's best not to create opportunities for alcohol to ruin our lives. Over time, I have heard many tragic stories about the impact of alcohol on people's lives. For example, a meditator at Bhavana Society shared that many years ago she did not enjoy drinking and only drank a little when pressured by friends. At parties with alcohol, she never finished a beer. She would hold the bottle all night to blend in with the drinkers. After graduating, she moved to a different community. Her new friends drank regularly, and she slowly picked up the habit of occasionally drinking for fun. She recounted a night when, feeling distressed, she drank strong liquor glass after glass. When friends expressed concern and tried to stop her, she cursed them and told them to mind their own business. Suddenly, she felt a strange sensation throughout her body. She later realized it was a chemical change. From that moment, she became an alcoholic. For 2 years, she drank daily and got drunk at least a few times a week. Her personality changed negatively, causing her great suffering. Finally, she sought help from alcohol rehab centers and has been sober for many years now. There are many reasons why people turn to intoxicants. Young people may want to feel more grown-up or intellectual. Shy or anxious individuals may want to relax or be more accepted by others. those with problems may want to find an escape. All these motivations arise from suffering, from wanting to escape the reality of what is happening in the present moment. However, contemplating this issue reveals that running away never solves any problem or reduces any suffering. Addiction to alcohol or drugs only increases our suffering. It causes us to lose self-respect, moral integrity, and self-control. We can easily lie, engage in sexual misconduct, steal, or do worse things. We may destroy our health, wealth, marriages, families, jobs, or businesses. We may lose the respect of others and our self-esteem. Ultimately, we will be left abandoned, drowning in suffering, wondering why such terrible things happen to us. In short, the best cure for addiction is to avoid using intoxicants in the first place. To better practice the Noble Eightfold Path, we can consider the broader meaning of this fifth precept at a higher level of restraint from using intoxicants. In what other situations do we use substances, and why? Using this aspect of right action as a general guide, question your motivations, and ask if you are trying to avoid mindfulness. How do you escape your problems? By reading newspapers, engaging in idle chatter? Mindfulness can help us identify what we use to avoid constantly facing reality. Higher precepts for lay people. We need to observe the 5 precepts daily. However, if we wish to progress faster on the path, we can voluntarily follow additional precepts for a certain period. These precepts include the basic 5 precepts and some stricter ones. Some meditators vow to keep these precepts on special occasions, such as during meditation retreats or when they stay at meditation centers or monasteries. There are 8 precepts: no killing, no stealing, no sexual misconduct, no lying, no intoxicants, no eating after noon, no dancing, singing, music, or shows, and no use of jewelry, cosmetics, or perfumes, no luxurious beds or seats. Occasionally observing these 8 precepts can enhance our meditation practice. With a clear conscience and no reason for remorse, our concentration can develop more strongly. In ancient times, people in Buddhist countries observed the 8 precepts for an entire day, 4 times a month. On these days, they would go to the temple or meditation center, spend the whole day practicing meditation, reciting scriptures, listening to teachings, and discussing the Dharma. Sometimes they would make pilgrimages from one temple or sacred site to another. Wherever they gathered, they would meditate and listen to Dharma talks given by knowledgeable laypeople or monks. The next day, they would return to their daily activities. Today, very few people practice this religious ritual, uposatha. Most of us, when not earning a living or taking care of children, engage in household chores, watch television, attend parties, go to restaurants, or visit bars. When tired of these activities, we go on vacations. Usually we work hard to earn money for these vacations, but they often involve another chase for pleasure. Upon returning home, we sometimes feel we need another vacation to recover from the previous one. Then we must continue working hard because without money, there will be no vacations. If we don't work hard, there will be no money. Perhaps you have also recognized this endless cycle of suffering. However, practicing uposatha to observe the 8 precepts offers an alternative choice. Observing uposatha for a day, a weekend, or longer can provide a real break from daily activities, leaving us refreshed, clear-headed, and free from fatigue and irritation. We don't need to go to a temple to observe these precepts. We can practice them at home. When there are children in the house, the opportunity for quiet and freedom may be rare. Therefore, using these precious times to cultivate inner peace is very important. The immediate benefits of this practice include feelings of peace, relaxation, improved health, and a clearer perspective on life and death. This occasional discipline can soothe and bring comfort to both body and mind. For example, those who typically eat 3 or 4 meals a day may find that fasting 1 day a week is beneficial. They can start by eating only 2 meals a day and fasting afterward. These 2 meals should include a full breakfast and a light lunch. They should skip dinner. Since there isn't much physical activity after a heavy evening meal, digestion is slow, and the food stays in the stomach until the next morning. When we don't eat in the evening, we will feel quite hungry the next morning. Then we can have a full breakfast. Most days, due to family and work commitments, we can't have a full breakfast and a light or no evening meal. Therefore, having a special day to practice a posauthor gives us the opportunity to try this eating method. The time we save in the evening by not having to prepare, eat, and clean up after a heavy meal can be used for many beneficial activities, such as meditating or reading Buddhist scriptures. Although this practice is not easy at first, it is a wonderful habit to cultivate. Remember, nothing is easy in the beginning. Once you are accustomed to not eating much, you can try fasting for an entire day. Do not eat any food, but drink plenty of water and fruit juices. Dedicate that day to yourself, reading and meditating. Such a day can be a wonderful short break for both body and mind. Formally observing the 8 precepts helps us maintain mindfulness. When we start to do something that violates one of these precepts, our mind will say, "Wait a moment, remember," and we will recall, "Oh, I shouldn't." The precepts act like the whip a driver uses to gently remind the horse to stay on the path, or the horn of a car to remind the driver to stay on the road. Lay people can also choose to observe a set of precepts for life, known as the 8 precepts. These precepts include the 5 basic precepts, plus 3 additional ones related to right speech, refraining from harsh speech, refraining from abusive speech, and refraining from slanderous speech. In 1998, during the 10-year anniversary of the founding of the Bhavana Society, members were invited to participate in a ceremony to take the 8 precepts for life. This was suggested by one of the board members, as she herself wanted to take the 8 precepts. Participants were asked to attend a 2-day retreat before the ceremony to focus on the meaning of their commitment. The invitation was warmly received. 36 people attended the retreat, pledging to rely on the Buddha and observe the 8 precepts for life. Since then, we have held this ceremony annually. Preparing mentally to take the 8 precepts is not easy for some meditators. Some feel fearful, while others find it difficult to adhere to the precepts. It is indeed challenging to make such a commitment. The precept-taking ceremony is quite simple. Participants recite the commitment together as a group from the scriptures. Then each person receives a new Dharma name in the traditional Pali language. This simple ceremony leaves a positive impression on the lives of those who take the precepts, significantly influencing how they speak. After taking the precepts, when harsh words slip out, they immediately recognize their mistake. The precepts act as a conscience reminder, causing them to stop. Gradually, they will no longer use harsh speech. This simple transformation helps them see how the precepts operate to create happiness. Many people who have taken the 8 precepts have written to thank me. They said it was a turning point in their lives. But why should they thank me? I did not ask them to make this commitment. They volunteered. They made the commitment not for me, their loved ones, or anyone else, nor because the law required it, or for global benefit. They voluntarily observed these precepts for themselves, for their own lives, for their happiness in the present and the future. You should not be afraid to commit to practicing right action or observing the 8 precepts, or taking the 8 precepts for life. Instead, you should be glad that you have decided to act to live a better life. Those addicted to alcohol, drugs, gambling, or other unwholesome behaviors find it very difficult to decide to stop. They procrastinate and always have many excuses to delay. But once they decide to change and observe the precepts for a while, they find their minds clearer, they eat and sleep better, save money, and their relationships with family and society improve. As a result, they are full of gratitude and pride for choosing the right path. Similarly, we may also find it difficult to commit to abandoning unwholesome actions. But once we make the commitment and persevere in practicing, we will be happy, at ease, and joyful that we made a decision that brings about positive transformation in our lives. Mindfulness of right action. The Buddha taught, all virtuous speech, action, and thought arise from a mindful mind. In other words, right action naturally emerges from a mindful mind. Let's examine why this is so. Every intentional action of body, speech, and mind has a profound impact on us. When we harm someone or act wrongly, we often experience physical distress, leading to a state of mental agitation and suffering. Mindfulness helps us clearly see these harmful effects. We see that an unwholesome action leads to a feeling of remorse, which in turn leads to anxiety and distress, making the mind restless. When the mind is agitated, we lose the ability to be calm. The more negative the action, the more chaotic and anxious the mind becomes. This vicious cycle of negative karma influences us to commit further wrongdoings. Conversely, with a mindful mind, we see that when we act with love and kindness, our mind becomes light and peaceful. A tranquil mind helps us feel happier and enables deeper concentration. Knowing this, we become more enthusiastic in pursuing wholesome actions. Our body and mind become healthier and clearer. These positive outcomes help us advance on the spiritual path. I would also like to expand on this by saying that mindfulness in keeping precepts, whether it be 5, 8, or more, also enhances our dignity and beauty. When we speak or act mindfully regarding the precepts, we feel at ease and peaceful. And when the mind is unburdened, your face will radiate brightness and joy. Thinking about the good deeds we have done brings great joy. This peaceful mind shines through your eyes and face, making others feel close to you. When we are mindful of right action, an unburdened mind helps us focus on each passing moment, not in a despondent or passive way. We put all our abilities and intelligence into being aware of what is happening in our mind and interacting skillfully with the world around us. In this way, we develop awareness of our actions. Such a mindful mind becomes even more essential when our endurance is tested. It's easy to maintain precepts and act courteously when no one challenges or disturbs us. But when someone says something hurtful or provokes us, our mind can become unsettled instantly. However, if mindfulness is present, it will arise at the right moment to say, pause for a moment to let the mind calm down. It's better not to say or do anything regrettable. If we maintain mindfulness in all activities, we will remember to stay calm when provoked. For example, when grieving the loss of a loved one or a valuable possession, even a small provocation can make us angry. At that time, we must be extra careful in our interactions, like a person without shoes walking cautiously to avoid broken glass. The same applies when we are sick, tired, hungry, lonely, suffering, or irritated. In such times, maintaining mindfulness in every moment helps us remember our current vulnerability to avoid actions that might cause regret. Another case when you must be highly mindful is when you feel you are in an environment where past habits might tempt you to violate ethical precepts. Someone who has easily stolen before must immediately become mindful when they see someone's wallet within reach. Someone who was once an alcoholic must become mindful when offered a free beer. A married man who has struggled with lust and is given a woman's business card must remind himself, if I take this number, it will tempt me to sin. My mind will not be at peace. I love my wife and children and do not want to harm my family. It's best to not take it or discard it immediately. Before achieving enlightenment and fully refining the mind, we may commit many other unwholesome acts. Before doing something we know is wrong, we should pause and mindfully reflect on how this action might harm us. For example, if we feel tempted to steal money from our employer, we need to reflect on the consequences of theft, living in fear of getting caught. If caught, we will surely lose our job, our honor, and even our freedom. Even if we are not punished by law, our conscience will punish us immediately. If just thinking about such an act makes the mind restless, imagine how disturbed it will be if we carry it out. When an unwholesome thought is just a fleeting idea, we can live with it. But once it becomes action, we will never live in peace. We must also weigh the short-lived happiness an unwholesome act might bring against the long-term suffering it causes. For example, you may feel the urge to hit someone. This thought may arise because you believe you will feel satisfied afterward. I got my revenge. This person won't dare do that again. But you cannot predict the outcome accurately. The other person may become angry and hit back harder. They may harbor resentment and plan to attack you secretly. An unwise reaction can lead to prolonged and bitter conflicts. I know a person in Sri Lanka who had a long-standing feud with a neighbor. To take revenge, he built a hut next to the neighbor's well. The neighbor complained, asking him to remove it, but he refused. Eventually, the neighbors fell ill. The dispute between the two families escalated until one committed murder. The law intervened, and the man ended up in jail. Both families suffered, but their hatred will continue for many generations. Such neighborly disputes occur everywhere. There are billions of such arguments. If such disputes arise for us, we must stop immediately and try to calm the situation. Uncontrolled disputes harm everyone involved. Right action is not something the Buddha invented. The truth is that unwholesome actions always bring suffering and cause hatred. As the Buddha expressed this idea, hatred is never appeased by hatred. By love alone is hatred appeased. This is a timeless law. The Buddha did not say he created this law. It applies not just to Buddhists but to everyone. With an enlightened mind, the Buddha could clearly see that harmful consequences arise from wrong actions. He taught, if one acts or speaks with a defiled mind, suffering follows him like the wheel that follows the foot of the ox. If one acts or speaks with a pure mind, happiness follows him like a shadow that never leaves. Right action not only purifies our mind, but also positively affects everyone around us. I once heard a story about a monk who demonstrated how mindfulness of right action can help others. The temple where the monk lived had a jackfruit tree bearing fruit. Jackfruit is very beneficial for the monastery's sustenance. Each large jackfruit, with its protein-rich seeds and thick flesh, can be used to prepare many dishes. Poor families who cannot afford food can survive on jackfruit. Although jackfruit is not a valuable fruit, stealing it in impoverished areas can sometimes cost the thief their life. One night, the monk noticed a thief picking jackfruit in the temple. The thief was high up in the tree, lowering each fruit with a rope to avoid making noise and attracting attention. The thief had a way of tying the rope around the fruit so that when it touched the ground, the rope would loosen. The thief would then pull the rope up to tie the next fruit. The monk stood silently under the jackfruit tree. As each fruit touched the ground, he helped remove the rope. Eventually, the thief climbed down. He nearly fainted upon seeing the smiling monk waiting for him. The monk gently, not like a victim of theft, but like a concerned parent, asked, "Have you picked enough jackfruit? Do you need more?" There was no need for noisy scolding, which could have made the thief's situation worse with the other temple residents. The monk's gentle and generous attitude made the thief so ashamed that he quickly left and never returned to steal from the temple again. What should you do if you violate one of the ethical precepts of right action? The answer is simple. Practice mindfulness. First, be aware of what you have done. Then, if possible, make amends. Finally, resolve to uphold the precepts of right action in the future. If you have broken a precept, recommit to it. Then let go of the wrongdoing. Regret, worry, or anxiety about consequences beyond our control does not help us. Accept past mistakes with the same generosity and compassion the monk showed the jackfruit thief. Doing so will help you increase your diligence in practicing right action. Summary of right action. Anyone interested in spiritual development must observe the 5 precepts: not killing, not stealing, not lying, not engaging in sexual misconduct, and not using drugs or alcohol. Eating meat, by definition, is not considered killing. Killing or taking a life involves intent, awareness, planning, and acting according to the plan. When we refrain from killing, we practice compassion and do not threaten the lives of any beings. Stealing means taking what is not given, including others' thoughts and ideas. When we do not steal, we develop respect for others' needs and practice sympathetic joy. The precept against sexual misconduct includes not raping, not forcing someone to have intercourse against their will, not sexually abusing children, animals, someone else's spouse, or anyone unable to protect themselves. It also includes deceit in relationships. When we refrain from sexual misconduct, lowly desires can be eradicated. Sexual relations with a spouse or partner are not considered sexual misconduct. We must avoid all intentional abuse of the senses. Doing so helps us let go of craving and develop generosity towards others. Alcohol or drug addiction can occur quickly or gradually become a habit. Addiction is very harmful, and it is best not to try addictive substances. When we avoid using addictive substances, we can maintain clarity of mind and practice to eliminate delusions. We can develop mindfulness and train to act rightly according to reality. Observing additional precepts, whether they are the 8 precepts for a day or lifelong commitments to 8 precepts, can be an effective tool to aid in meditation and further progress on the spiritual path. Mindfulness can help us overcome temptations, avoid arguments, and act with compassion towards both others and our own unwholesome behaviors. Thank you for listening. If you found this video helpful, please share it with those who might benefit from it. Don't forget to leave your thoughts in the comments section below. Hit the like button, follow, and turn on the notification bell. This is how you can show your support for me. Once again, thank you very much, and see you in the next videos.